And as we now know, Trump and, of course, the administration knew in advance that the Israelis were going to attack. Not only didn't they object, but Trump is now boasting of the success of this attack and the role that he played in it.
So recently, Glenn Greenwald had a podcast where he talks about Israel's recent strike on Iran, drawing the U.S. into a new theater of war, why it represents a failure of diplomacy for Trump, why it's a failure for peace and negotiation, and why the U.S. is much more involved than is being alleged by some. So let's watch and let's react. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
We devoted our entire show last night to the question of whether it really seemed likely or possible that there would be an imminent attack by Israel on Iran, and if so, what the role of the United States would be, the reaction of Donald Trump would be, in light of Trump's continuous insistence, including as of yesterday, that he did not want the Israelis to strike Iran because doing so would impede his efforts to secure a deal diplomatically with Iran to avert the need for a conflict. And we had Kurt Mills on, who's the executive director of the American Conservative Magazine, where he expressed the view that I thought was quite reasonable, though I certainly had doubts, and I think he did as well, that it seemed, at least for the moment, that an Israeli strike on Israel was unlikely given Trump's genuinely stated desire to avert any kind of war and instead to resolve the conflict diplomatically. Right as we were concluding, maybe literally within 2 to 3 minutes of concluding the show, there was an attack by Israel on Iran that was launched. We learned about it only immediately after the show, but it was a perfect way to sort of dissect the possibilities and the like. And Israel did launch what has turned out to be a major military strike on Iran, a continuous ongoing one that is striking targets, principally their nuclear targets in western Iran, almost no attacks so far in central Iran, and actually zero in the east, but it also has targeted various commanders in the chain of command in the Iranian military, and by reports from the Iranian military as well as the Israeli military, many of those have succeeded in killing many of the key leaders in the Iranian military chain of command. That would obviously impede an immediate response by Iran. The political leadership in Iran, including its leader Ayatollah Khomeini, as well as the elected leaders of Iran, have not been killed, nor, according to Israel, targeted, nor will they be.
So yeah, this is the fruits of what was a split Trump cabinet. Part of his cabinet really wanted to strike Iran, the Neocon leaning members, and part of it, supposedly, according to that New York Times article, did not. They wanted the peace process to go through, a possible negotiation with Iran unilaterally maybe, with Israel cut out of it completely, that curtailed the nuclear program to a greater extent even than the JCPOA under the Obama administration, but that would have taken the pretense for war off the table. That's exactly what Netanyahu didn't want. So Netanyahu ambitiously decided to launch this attack before that could go through. The complicity of the Trump administration and the U.S. at this point, it's hard to understand exactly how complicit it is, but we know Trump was aware of it. He broadcasted this message as it was happening. We know that Netanyahu has wanted regime change there for a long time. He said overtly in a public announcement, a public speech, that he wants the Libyan model to apply there. And after this bombing campaign that Glenn just talked about, he had a grand speech where he said that this military operation is going to continue as long as necessary to accomplish the goal. Well, as we know, he struck residential areas of Iran right off the bat to try to decapitate part of the military leadership, apparently. So the goal is not to eliminate Iran's nuclear capabilities. It's to dismantle their ruling class and kind of decapitate its leadership. They appear to have killed some, though not, as Glenn says, the elected leaders. We'll see where that goes, but the U.S. has provided aid, the U.S. has provided weaponry and intelligence. You can't just say that the U.S. isn't involved. It's very clear at this point that they are. They've also supplied interceptor missiles in Tel Aviv.
At least that's what we're hearing as of now, but the attacks are ongoing and unfolding, and certainly the Israelis and the Americans created a perception that a strike was unlikely given Trump's repeatedly stated desire to let the talks progress diplomatically, and yet those attacks nonetheless occurred. And as we now know, Trump and, of course, the administration knew in advance that the Israelis were going to attack. Not only didn't they object, but Trump is now boasting of the success of this attack and the role that he played in it. So it's very clear that even though the Americans didn't directly participate in the sense that American planes were sent or that American bombs were dropped, as we talked about last night, would likely not be the case, the Americans were heavily involved in the sense of coordinating with the Israelis over those attacks, knowing that they were coming, giving the green light. And now already the Trump administration is deploying military assets in the region with the attempt to protect Israel from any possible retaliation from Iran. So
yeah, the U.S. is already sucked into this thing, and that was the worst thing that could possibly happen. So it's not enough for Trump to say, hey, Israel's doing this on their own. If Trump really wanted to stop this, or a U.S. elected president with a political mandate wanted to stop this, they would just have to withdraw all aid to Israel or threaten that. Israel would not be able to do this if that would have happened. But as we know, the Israel lobby controls Trump, many of his closest supporters, almost every key legislator in the U.S. If you want to see true bipartisanism in action, look at bills and votes for U.S. aid to Israel. It's overwhelming. We know from Massey that AIPAC has a guy assigned to each and every congressman, except for him because they don't touch him. I think there might be some others too, but they are deeply entrenched in the American political system, so is the military-industrial complex, who wants a steady flow of weaponry into the Middle East to profit off it, just like they want that in Ukraine.
It's already a war in which the United States is involved, a new Middle East war, a very dangerous Middle East war in which the United States under President Trump has now become involved. Here from the New York Times this morning describing the basic facts as we know them. Iran reels from Israeli strikes on nuclear sites and top officials. Quote, Iran was reeling on Friday from waves of Israeli strikes that decapitated its military chain of command and targeted a key nuclear facility as President Trump urged Tehran to strike a deal curbing its nuclear program or risk, quote, even more brutal attacks. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described the assault as a last resort to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran, which Israel views as an existential threat. The attacks, which the Iranian military said were continuing on Friday afternoon, also killed several top Iranian officials and nuclear scientists and hit Tehran's long-range missile facilities and aerial defenses. Mr. Trump, whose administration has been holding nuclear talks with Iranian officials, said on Friday that Tehran, quote, might make a deal or must make a deal before there is nothing left. That's what Trump said this morning. Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left.
Yeah, this is the U.S.'s new form of diplomacy. It's strike first, and then you try to use coercion to bring parties to the table. Well, what country will think that you're trustworthy if you've already laid out plans to bomb them long in advance, like we know about the clean break strategy, that there were plans on the table as far ago as 1996 to enact regime change in Iraq. Wesley Clark walked into the Pentagon 10 days after 9/11 and was shown a classified memo saying that there were going to be 7 regime change operations in 5 years, and Iran was the last one of them. Well, guess which ones have all come to fruition? All of them except for Iran. Up until yesterday, it looks like that's begun. So Trump's form of diplomacy is not speak loudly and carry a stick, speak softly and carry a large stick. It's actually just bomb the other country and hope then it comes to the table. We saw something similar in a parallel situation with Ukraine just last week or so, when Ukraine, ostensibly Ukraine, may have been other elements of NATO, struck Russian nuclear bombers, and that escalated tensions with Russia. So what makes Putin think that the U.S. is a trustworthy party to negotiate a peace with? Why would Tehran think that now? It's hard for me to believe it, especially if Israel's taking the lead on this, and it did seem to be that there was a schism within the Trump administration on this question, with people like Tulsi Gabbard and J.D. Vance not wanting to bomb Iran, according to this article at least, whereas others did want to bomb Iran. And, this represents a triumph for the neocons. This is what they've always wanted. Bush said Iran was in the axis of evil. Netanyahu has pled the U.S. for regime change there forever.
For years, Israel fought Iran's proxy forces across the Middle East, and more recently, it has exchanged volleys of strikes with Iran. Yet Friday's strikes, for the first time, it successfully hit Tehran's nuclear facilities, including Iran's main nuclear enrichment facility at Natanz, which an Israeli military spokesman had said suffered, quote, significant damage. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, said that Israel, quote, should anticipate a harsh punishment. Later on Friday, the Israeli military announced that Iranian forces had fired about 100 drones at Israel, as Mr. Netanyahu viewed the fighting would last, quote, as many days as it takes. The Israeli military said it was working to intercept the Iranian attack, and there were no immediate indications of significant damage caused by the drones. Now, the news of the Israeli strike last night brought a lot of speculation about the role that Donald Trump had played in this, if any, and a lot of people, including his most ardent defenders, were eager to exonerate him from the responsibility that he now clearly has for having encouraged or permitted or even helped initiate a new war in the Middle East, something that Trump repeatedly said he was so proud of in his first term, that he was the first president in decades not to involve the U.S. in a new war.
He also slammed Joe Biden for launching targeted strikes against Iran just months ago. Late into Biden's term, in 2024, Biden struck Iran, and Trump said that showed weakness. He should bring them to the table. Well, it looks like Trump gave Netanyahu the green light for this and is supporting it unconditionally with resources. We know that today. They sent resources and military operations to be able to defend Tel Aviv from Iran's retaliation. And there's no corporate media headline, by the way, that says Iran has the right to defend itself, nor will there ever be.
And a lot of people are trying to suggest that this is some sort of embarrassment, because Trump did say yesterday publicly, I don't want the Israelis attacking Iran now, because I want these diplomatic talks to continue, including one that had been scheduled and confirmed on Sunday in Oman, which was the sixth round of talks. So Trump publicly postured as if he would oppose any sort of Israeli strike.
Yeah, Glenn's right about that. There were scheduled to be additional talks between the U.S. and Iran this weekend, actually. They were supposed to take place. Who knows whether any kind of negotiations will even be on the table between the U.S. and Iran at this point.
It is utterly inconceivable that Israel would have struck Iran without getting the green light from the Trump administration for so many reasons.
Yeah.
Including the fact that had they done so, Trump would have a million different ways to punish them, using all the leverage that the United States has in terms of what it provides to Israel monetarily and militarily and politically and diplomatically. But also, the Israelis need and are already relying upon the U.S. military to protect itself from any possible Iranian retaliation. And the idea that they would have done this without Trump's green light seemed immediately and intuitively absurd that they might do so. And
the U.S. is already sucked into protecting Israel from that retaliation. That was inevitable. It wasn't just going to not happen. Iran was not just going to sit on its hands after being struck like this.
Since then, Trump has issued a series of statements that strongly suggest that he not only knew about it, but approved of the strikes and wants to even take credit for what's being depicted as the success of the first wave of strikes. Here he is early this morning on Truth Social, quote, I gave Iran a chance after chance to make a deal. I told them in the strongest of words to, quote, just do it. But no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just couldn't get it done. I told them it would be much worse than anything they know, anticipated, or were told, that the United States makes the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world by far, and that Israel has a lot of it and much more to come, and they know how to use it. Certain Iranian hardliners spoke bravely, but they didn't know what was about to happen. They are all dead now, and it will only get worse. There has already been great death and destruction, but there is still time to make this slaughter with the next already planned attacks being even more brutal, come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left and save what was once known as the Iranian Empire. No more death, no more destruction. Just do it because it is too late. God bless you all. Not really sure what that even means at this point.
Yeah, for all the rhetoric about Trump wanting to, stay out of the world's affairs and stop wars before they began, it's only a month ago he was at Riyadh saying that that was the new Trumpian foreign policy, is where the U.S. should just stop butting into the affairs of the Middle East. Well, that hasn't happened here. In fact, the U.S. is just being led by the Israel lobby to enact regime change. This is the start of that. This is what they've always wanted. They don't particularly care about the nuclear capabilities because if there was a deal with Iran, they would not have the political capital or justification necessary to carry it out. And for Trump to boast about that, like that's his new diplomatic tactic, is just bomb these countries and then hope they come to the table. There's going to be more deaths unless they do. That's, textbook neocon. That's textbook interventionist. That's exactly what Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich spoke against for their entire careers. They were raked over the coals for it by the neocons. And now supposedly, in the moment where the neocons are supposedly out of power, they still seem to wield immense influence, regardless of administration.
I mean, the Israelis certainly haven't taken out the Iranian nuclear facilities and decapitating several of the commanders in the chain of command, or even killing some of their nuclear physicists, as they did apparently while in their apartment buildings in Tehran, killing other people as well, can, I suppose, set back the Iranian program a little bit. The Israelis have killed many nuclear physicists in Iran over the years, have damaged various facilities, but ultimately the know-how of how to make nuclear weapons is something you can't extinguish or eradicate, and it would take infinitely greater military force of the kind the Israelis really don't possess, like B-2 bombers dropping massive bombs to destroy underground facilities to really physically eliminate the Iranian nuclear program. But President Trump seems to be saying that that's exactly what the U.S. in conjunction with Israel will do, unless the Iranians immediately to submit to some sort of deal that really wouldn't be a deal, but I guess it would be seen as a sort of term of surrender.
This is such a big blunder, maybe Trump's biggest blunder so far in an administration that's full of them, from the Epstein files to the failure to secure peace in Ukraine, to continue the aid to Ukraine, to not enact the DOGE cuts that were promised and projected. There's been 9 million of cuts so far working through the Senate, whereas original projections were 2 trillion cuts. But this Iran deal is just potentially catastrophic. It really runs the risk of a broader Middle Eastern war that the U.S. is sucked into and can't get out of. What are Israel's neighbors going to do? Who knows if Jordan or Jordan or Lebanon or Egypt are going to intervene on either side of this conflict? It's just so disastrous. And the fact that Russia is actually an ally of Iran, are they going to get sucked into it in some regard as well? Could there be another theater of this new Cold War with Russia opened up? So my two biggest concerns are, one, this jeopardizes potential peace in Ukraine and a peace deal that ends U.S. support for Ukraine, because Putin, what would make him think that Trump is trustworthy whatsoever? The Ukraine attack on Russian bombers certainly jeopardized peace there. This new strike on Iran certainly jeopardizes any kind of peace deal with Iran. And the two powers are allies. So this is disastrous. And the other angle is that there are plenty of U.S. forces stationed throughout the Middle East. Iran is not Yemen. Iran has serious capabilities when it comes to weaponry. Ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, they have drones. They've already used some of those against Tel Aviv. Some military ministries, I believe, have been hit already, whereas, of course, the Israelis went to the residential bombings first to try to decapitate leadership. Probably killed plenty of innocents there, too. Not like they're not specialists in that over what's happened in Gaza. But U.S. forces could be struck by Iran, and that's the biggest catastrophe that could happen, because if U.S. forces are struck and killed by Iran, that is guaranteed to suck the U.S. into this regime change crusade that will be disastrous. Regime change was already disastrous there in 1953, and the U.S. warmongers have not learned from that. They haven't learned that that is what caused a reactionary element to take power in Iran in 1978 and 1979 when Khomeini came into power, and the Shias now reign supreme there. It's because of a reaction to a U.S. coup. So if there's a new coup and regime change, it's not going to bode well. We're sucked into more of the worst calamities that happen and transpire naturally under entangling alliances. But I do want to hear from what you guys say. Let me know in the comments below. Do you think that the U.S. is going to get sucked into a regional war and directly participate in regime change operations in Iran, or do you think it can mostly stay out of it while still aiding Israel? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.